terms of like the theoretical framing and segmentation, for me, it was very important that obviously the social responsibility theory, was very much more important, that we carried from the four theories of the press. And basically, I explored the social responsibility theory as a very important aspect of the measure of deliverable of the public broadcaster. And another thing again, sorry, that I had to perhaps also learn, I had to learn to untouched, because remember, I was working for the SABC,
yes.
obviously now researching about the SABC. Now, I remember when I had conversation with Dr. and he said to me, well, you don't sound like someone who's researching about the SABC. You sound like someone who's working for the SABC. Even though you write like someone who's working for the SABC. You must learn to separate the two. And
yes.
to learn to separate the two, but obviously in terms of like the theoretical segmentation and framing and all of that, social responsibility was very, very important. And also the public sphere, Jagan Habermas' theory of the public sphere as well is very important, because we have to understand that, the public broadcaster plays a very much more important role in promoting democracy and providing a space where members of the public can be able to engage in civic issues and civic, matters, and shape the public, discourse on political issue. And mind you, now, obviously, we can't talk about broadcasting and therefore don't talk about technology, Therefore, Jenkins' work on, convergence culture was very important. So also look at that meta convergence, theory and see as to how can it provide lenses to understand, the space in which the SABC can actually operate, provide its services, and yet being technologically aligned or being technologically, fluent, like the any other, parties as well. So that was my approach in terms of my theoretical, framing and segmentation. Now, in terms of my methodological approach, so the study was very much more qualitative, because I needed to have an in-depth understanding as to, what are the strategies that could actually put forward, what could be done to rescue, to save, and to harness other revenues outside commercial revenues. So obviously, if you read my study, you realize that, even outside my study, there's a common public domain knowledge that, the public broadcasters such as the SABC, harness a lot of its revenues from commercial revenues, you know what I mean? And then therefore, obviously, I just needed to have a bigger understanding behind the numbers, Hence, therefore, my methodological approach was very qualitative. I had a lot of in-depth interviews with key industry players. These are the executive producers across SABC. I had the commissioning editors who oversee different productions and budgets, and manages, these productions for the SABC. I had people from channels. I had people from supporting units, So it was quite a very, comprehensive study, but, it was mainly, qualitative, and the in-depth interviews in this case were used to kind of provide thick descriptions and thick exploration of the subject, so that we could be able to account, for various strategies that are put into the table and understand the rationale and the motivations behind the sentiments that are forwarded as strategy to harness revenues.
Yes. And interestingly, just methodologically, what a lot of us go through when we use human participants, right, study collaborators or participants, is that sometimes with ethical clearance and stuff and just access, we tend to get many challenges as well. On your side, access to the right people to have the conversations with, did you have similarly, like many other people who I know who struggled actually with access to the right people for the interviews? Did you have a similar struggle? Or because of your already being at the SABC, could you literally over coffee just ask people like, hey, interested in this, in participating in the study? Or what was it like for you?
You won't believe this. When I actually sent the first call, I sent to multitudes of the people that I know,
Yeah.
And only a handful replied, And then later on, you have to make follow-ups, to gauge the interest, for people to actually participate. So it wasn't quite very easy, in terms of the access, because I could remember like most of the people, that I actually wanted, I couldn't get because they were too busy, you know what I mean? And some did not reply to my call, and even when I made follow-ups, nobody, not nobody, but very few people actually replied, but obviously because I was using purposive sampling, so I then have to be strategic about who I want to approach, and those key particular individuals, and obviously I had to make sure that there is diversity, there is far, there is balance, and there is fairness, that I don't only feature people who've been in the industry for the longest time, but I also feature people that are quite very new as well, and that kind of like, apply like a cross-functional approach in a sense that I don't interview people from one department, but it should be across departments, you know what I mean? And so it was quite very hybrid in terms of like the approach. And I guess that what allowed me to have quite a very thick study, and be able to have thick perspectives and voices on the subject. So in the question of conveniency, no, it wasn't that quite very convenient, I mean, just like any other study, it's a mission to actually, kind of like, pin down participants to actually commit. But I guess because of the fact that I was very clear that, through purpose of something, or I know exactly how to engage, but also to address the gaps in terms of like the diversity and the balance and the fairness and the equity and all of that.
No, that's interesting because I did find that there's this pattern as well. In a lot of studies that involves human collaborators, right, where just in terms of access, a lot of researchers struggle actually, which is something that I also notice makes a lot of emerging researchers try and avoid using sort of human collaborators. And I have sometimes also, to be honest, advised, especially at honors and master's level, advised students like, if at all possible, maybe at this level, try just sticking to, deep critical textual kinds of analysis for now. And then maybe you'll move on to human participants later. It's precisely because a lot of times when you read on people's methodologies, right, and their processes with access to participants, it tends to be quite challenging. So
Sure.
I guess one is not fully surprised that you had similar challenges as well. I read parts of the study as well, and there's one thing also that stands out. It's in the abstract as well, and later on when you sort of reiterated, you use this word that one of your findings and one of the recommendations, I suppose, that comes from your study is that the SABC, there's a need for the SABC to then modernize their business strategies. So for me, just in that sense of modernization, it implies so many interesting things in terms of where the SABC is then in terms of business strategy. Could you unpack for us just around that recommendation, that finding? Modernizing, what are we talking on? On what levels is this modernization? Is this need for modernization of the financial strategy for the SABC?
Sure. Basically, we have to understand that the SABC is one of the oldest broadcasters in South Africa. Basically, since 1936, they've been the monopoly. Then later throughout the years, they diversified and the market was opened, and then obviously with many other players, but obviously when the other players came in on board, they came in with new technology, right? And yet the SABC was still kind of like operating based on the technology that it was incepted with. You know what I mean? And hence, for the need for it to modernize, to adopt new technology, the argument is very strong there on my findings that it needs to modernize, adopt new technology and be able to compete in the market while retaining its DNA and also while serving its mandate, So I think this is something that is also kind of like important, throughout literature. There's a scholar called Julian Doyle. She's one of the scholars of media economics, and she just talks a lot about the need, to modernize, to have broadcasters actually, modernizing and, adopting technology, you know what I mean? And also, competing. So basically, when I was doing my study, at that time, the SABC it had not launched its streaming platform, but it was on the pipeline, right? And therefore, there was a big noise from, Showmax, Netflix, and yada, yada, yada. And that the SABC was relying on, triple Ps, in order for it to have its work, on the streaming platforms, and yet it didn't even have any single platform, and therefore that argument became quite very strong and quite very dominant even during the findings that the SABC needs to look into the market and be able to copy the market. I remember one of the participants of my study was saying to me that, well, for the longest time, the competition what the market has been copying from the SABC. Now it's high time that the SABC actually copies from the market and from the competition, and hence, is positioned within the industry, and be able to play in the medicine space as with its competitors. And therefore, the argument of modernizing has come from that point of saying that the SABC is quite a very old organization, still uses the old technology. And one of my findings, if you read some of the findings on the challenges, one of the things that now obviously the SAPC, but this administration process still remains largely manual. There's no automation, right? And quite very well that a lot of like processes, it's kind of like drags, if the administration is manual, you know what I mean? And there is no workflow system that can automate processes and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And obviously that's what I meant, but I'm trying to say that it need to actually, modernize. And also, on the issue of red tape, I mean, if you read through the study, a lot of, the red tape issues were actually raised, just because obviously, the old mentality of how the SABC, used to operate, and therefore it was a fear that, this is the only thing that we know, and we are not open to new ways of doing things, hence, therefore, the argument for the need to modernize comes out quite very much more strong in terms of technology, modernize in terms of processes, and obviously modernize in terms of administration.
And I'm glad you've already started touching on, because I was going to ask if you could just briefly highlight to us some of what you call those internal and some of those external impediments, right, that are hindering the SABC's, I suppose, effective and successful harnessing of its revenue, right? Because it has this mandate as a public broadcast service platform, right? So there's a very clear non-commercial mandate. They cannot, harness revenue commercially. Like, I don't know if it's still the case, like the SABC3, for instance. It's the only channel that has the commercial mandate, commercialized aspect to it, right? So you've now touched on some of what those internal hindrances also are. We speak about red tape as well. Are there more other internal sort of impediments that stand or negate the harnessing of revenue? And what are some of the external ones? I'm already imagining even maybe our rate at paying back things like TV licenses. I'm pretty sure that's problematic.
Imagine rate is very high.
Yeah, because some of the stats I remember back, I don't know when I read this or if someone told me this, that SABC sometimes hardly even gets in 50% of TV licenses being paid. So I'm imagining that's part of the other external forces. To speak us briefly through some of those impediments, right? Those hindrances.
The hurdles. I'll call those the hurdles.
Yes.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that maybe I'm going to start with the external hurdles, the policy environment, is quite very constraining, restricting, and very limiting. You know what I mean? We have the ICASA, the must carry, regulation, which really, is a hurdle for the SABC, because now what does policy argue is that now for the subscription service provider, they are obliged, to carry the services of the SABC, the free-to-air platforms, on their platforms as part of like universal access, but at no cost. You know what I mean? So therefore, so you'd have a lot of these, platforms, subscriptions platforms, your OpenView, your whatsoever, carrying the SABC platforms, at no cost. You know what I mean? And that is a hurdle, because now remember, it takes resources, to produce the content. It takes, resources to transmit the content, and yet if you are going to have these synergies where in which the content is going to be the platforms, are going to be extended to the other platforms without, incurring revenues. That is basically, a huge loss, right? I had also a very interesting view, from the news, participant, a news colleague participant, who shared that obviously with news in terms of like the national event, there are two footages that news must have. One is going to be the international footage and the local footage, right? Now, the international footage is a clean footage. It goes to the rest of the globe, and that footage is for free. It is shared with BBC, Sky News, and all of those, and that footage is for free. Yet the SABC must send in the team to produce that footage, and yet they are not basically, incurring any revenues, because now everyone is having this access to this footage at no cost, just for free, totally, While on the other hand, if we were to receive, a footage from BBC, Sky News, we pay for that footage, so it was that imbalancing, in terms of like that the terms of trade, what I mean, that were very unfair to the SABC, while on the other hand, the other competitors, were stripping us off the money, what I mean, just like the sports rights, right? From super sport, there was that holding, culture, where in which the SABC couldn't broadcast some of the most important matches because super sport is holding the rights, and if the SABC is to buy that, kind of like to buy a right from super sport, they charge quite a lot of money, what I mean, so that kind of like mass carrier regulation and that policy environment was quite very much more limiting and restricting as well. And also another hurdle that also came in as well was that now the SABC is actually like a Schedule 2 entity, right? Meaning that now in terms of like triple PFMA, which governs the financial, operations of government departments, regards the SABC, so that is overseen by the National Treasury. Now, National Treasury regards the SABC as a Schedule 2 entity, meaning that it operates within the government set, frameworks and principles, of financial management and operations and all of that, And yet on the other hand, you have SAPC as a Schedule 2 entity, but yet it is expected, to operate as a company, what I mean, while most Schedule 2 entities like your, government departments, they get funding from the National Treasury, Well, even though the SABC does get funding from the National Treasury, but that funding is very much more limited. It does not cover, sport, entertainment, or news. It don't just cover education, what I mean? So basically, if you look into my report, you'll realize that 80% of the fundings, 85% of the revenues of the SABC comes in from the, commercial revenues. 3% comes in from the government, the one that I'm actually talking about now, and the other one actually comes in from the licenses, So, even that hurdle as well, that our revenue breakdown as well, is an issue because now you have a private broadcaster who's heavily reliant on the commercial revenue. Quite very well, obviously, with the commercial revenues and the political economy of the media, that obviously that has a very big drastic impact, in terms of the orientation and the direction of the entity, because now it is pressured or it is working against the forces of political economy. But this means now the SABC has to produce projects or products that will then speak, to the market, to the advertisers, and obviously that compromises the mandate, obviously, that it needs to actually carry and so forth. So those were some of like the handles that came forward from the study. In terms of like the internal hurdles, I had already hinted on those, that obviously the issue of lack of automation, and obviously other lack of kind of like improved technology. When I was doing my study at that time, I think the SABC has just moved from beta tapes to digital files submission, right? Meaning that now when producers submit episodes to the SABC, they don't have to submit via the tape anymore, but they have to submit via digital file. So that was a nice good kind of like upgrade, and that hurdle was actually getting redressed. And also like the another hurdle that came forward from the study, there were quite a lot, like the organizational culture as well, that it needs to be made clear, that people who've been there for the longest time tend to not be innovative. There needs to be like a reskilling and upskilling of those people, so that they actually are able to do their job in a manner that is very innovative, than them sitting down and doing one thing all over again for so many years. So that was a very kind of like diverse view of the hurdles facing the SABC. So only I'm just enticing on the few, but you have to read the whole entire study for you to find out the rest. Yes.
No, most definitely, yes. You have to read the entire study to get the rest.
Yes.
But this is for our viewers. Please read the entire study actually to get the rest of the information. But then as we move sort of towards the tail end of our discussion with regard to the study, right? When we do research, it's fantastic that we highlight the challenges, right? Then we are critical about those challenges as well. But then there is also that expectation to also at least make recommendations, right? Bring forth some well-supported solutions to sort of help deal with the research problem, right, that you have investigated. In your case, then, your study also makes some interesting interventions, right, where which we can read as or look as at alternative revenue harnessing. I'm trying to get the actual wording that you use here. Multiple alternative revenue streams to harness revenues. I think that's how you word it here. Yes. My notes are all over the place here, but you actually mentioned quite a few. There's things like services and commercial model.
Yes.
There's what you call an endowment funding and licensing. Yes. And public-private partnership initiatives, right? And as well as a hybrid model. Also briefly, if you could touch on those interventions, right? What do they look like? What are they in practice? You may touch on all or just on one or two of these interventions. What are they? What do they look like in practice? And how do they do that job of harnessing revenue for the SABC?
I want to dwell more on the commercial services model. Basically, this model, it basically recognizes the potential that SABC has, the asset that SABC has, and on how those assets could be turned into revenue streams, right? So I think one of them kind of like stream within the model is the real estate revenue, right? The SABC has office space that's not in use. You know what I mean? Those office spaces could actually be rented out, right? The SABC has studios that it could build and actually, rent out. You know what I mean? We have a handy facility which offers nice good, services for post-production. You know what I mean? Those could be, turned into services, and rented out to the public. You know what I mean? There's also, your M1 studio, which could be used for, recording of, concert, music, and all of that. That could be commercialized and actually, turned into a service, to make revenue. So there's also a merchandising, like for instance, you go around, I'm wearing a UNISA t-shirt.
The power of merchandising. It's a lovely commercial. You're right. It's a lovely commercial opportunity.
Yes.
Well. Yeah.
Yes. And and with regard to the merchandising, what they say was, now why don't you turn some of the most popular shows into like merchandise, right? Have some merchandise, right? You know what I mean? Have your kiddies merchandise, from the shows that are actually there and existing. You know what I mean? So there's been a number of kind of like streams that are put forward, or revenue streams that are put forward. And obviously the public endowment has got to do with like your, the media tax, right? and the TV licenses and all of those, But obviously, I don't really want to give out more because I want people to go and read, guys. This paper is just so very good. I work very hard
And
to produce this
I'm
paper.
actually also putting pressure on you as well, Doc. We also want one or two or more journal articles that give us more
Yes.
bite-sized chunks of the broader study. But certainly, please go access and read the broader study. You can reach out to me if you need the PDF, perhaps if you can't find it on Google Scholar. But yeah, continue. Sorry to catch you there.
Yeah, sure. And obviously, then the hybrid basically is when obviously you combine everything all together, and that obviously everything works out to your good. Obviously, it is expansion of the revenues. You don't limit yourself, and also the subscription service as well. For the SABC, sport platform. I think at the time it was not there. And there were thoughts of having like a freemium model, freemium meaning that obviously aspects of the platforms are free, subsidized by commercials, or if not, you need to subscribe so that you don't have to deal with commercials. So I mean, the study, was quite very comprehensive in terms of like the revenue streams, and the strategies that they actually put forward to help the public broadcaster to actually survive. And then obviously the intention is that now most of the public broadcasters in the continent, they look up to the SABC, as a torchlight, as that shining star, right? And obviously, one thing that I'm arguing in the study is that now if the SABC can be able to get this in quite correctly, this will also lead into major breakthroughs to the other broadcasters that are within the continent, as they will going to be learning from the SABC and replicating on what has been done by the broadcaster, and obviously therefore reaping off the effects of success if these are implemented quite very successfully.
Yeah. I love that. Those are lovely, clear sort of recommendations that you make. Have you been in touch with the SABC post PhD to give them access to the study, or a lovely executive summary of, guys, this is what you need to do. Please consider this. What has been the situation in that regard?
I had a very wonderful opportunity to present to the executive. I remember the CEO was there, CFO was there, and COO was there, and head of corporate affairs, the recruiter affairs was there. So I had a chance, to actually present this to the SABC management. They welcomed the study, and that I said that obviously, they're on the journey to redefine the organization, and therefore they will consult the study and obviously use some of its recommendations and findings.
Oh, that's fantastic. Then we do know that the work that we do is not in vain. It actually will have the kind of impacts that we are hoping the work has. So I'm really glad that you had the opportunity to present. Way forward now, Doc, or unless there's anything else about the study that you want to speak about now before I speak about what's the way forward from here onwards in terms of your research, having your niche, doing your research, and just building and growing within academia.
Sure. No, I think my study was a public service, right? So I've done my public duty.
Certainly.
I've done my public duty, in terms of trying to, restore, fix, rejuvenate, and kind of like, revive and aiding organizations that need a lot of revamp, and the study was very holistic in the manner in which, on how this could actually be done, So in terms of that chapter, in terms of my research on public service broadcasters and their financial revenues, I think I have exhausted that, the channel, but obviously I then would have to synthesize this into bits, through journals, convert the study into, journals so that it could be accessible to everybody, but that's the last bit that's left, where I have to convert the study into a journal, maybe 2 or 3 journal articles.
Yes. No, that'll be fantastic actually, because journal articles do tend to sort of travel a bit faster as well.
Sure.
Because oftentimes they do get prescribed to other levels of postgrad studies as well. So we do look forward to some of the papers and publications that will come from there as well. Then lastly, if you knew then what you know now, right, about PhDing and going on the PhD journey, what would you have done differently? Or was everything that happened, was it fine with you. It happened and it was what it was. But if you knew then what you know now, would something have changed,
I'll
perhaps?
use my experience that I have when I was doing my master's.
Yeah.
Please make sure that you find yourself a nice, good supervisor who will
Yeah.
prioritize you, you know,
Yeah.
who will advocate your work, you know, who will work to make you better, who will work so much harder so that you'll sound better, who will give you constructive criticism. You know what I mean? Who add so much value into your work and into your life, that when all this is done, like you look back and you just, become shunned or amazed at yourself that, wow, I couldn't believe I could do it, For
Mm.
me, one thing that I knew then that I know now, I make sure that I find a nice, good supervisor, because for the longest time, we had this fear of, your top-down approach, right? That you must be in, reverence of your supervisor, you know what I mean? Whatever they say is final, So it took me to have just one good supervisor to erase that kind of like notion that has been the noise, in my life as an academic for a longest time. You know what I mean? So for me, if you get it right with a supervisor, then you're sorted. Because
Oh,
now
that's fantastic.
most issues that postgraduates have is not, the academic issues, are the supervisor's issues, are the personality issues. So if you can get the supervisor issue for going right for you, then you're good. Then you're
Mm.
sorted.
Yeah. This has now really also sparked something I was thinking about of also having, a series of supervision, right? Postgraduate
Sure,
supervision as well.
sure,
And
sure.
your words just emphasizing to me that, or affirming to me that I certainly should also have that series worked into the
Please,
channel as well, because
that's very important.
it's
So important.
yes, yes, such an important conversation. And I love how you point out sometimes it's also a personality thing as well, right?
Sure,
But supervision is it's people managing. It is a lot of intellectual management, but it's also human relationship management as well in
sure.
many ways, right?
Yes,
So I think there's a lot of cultivation of conversations that needs to come from there. So I'll certainly also try conceptualize a sub series that has to do with supervision as well. But for today, though, I'm so grateful to you for making the time to join me in conversation and to have us record and archive this conversation, which I'm no doubt certain is going to assist someone who's also on this journey of postgraduate research and perhaps also on the PhD level of research as well.
sure.
So your insights, your experiences are so valuable. And please don't get tired of me if I invite you for future episodes because like I said, you have significant work experience that will also be useful for future episodes, right?
Yes,
About where do communication and media studies students actually end up in terms of industry, in terms of work, because not all of us will become academics, right?
sure,
Not all of us were built to be researchers, right?
sure.
So, what are some of the opportunities in industry for graduates from our field of communication and media studies? So, don't be tired of me if when I reach out in future as well for those
No,
conversations.
well, definitely, but I must say thanks, Prof, for this wonderful opportunity. For me, I wish I had this platform when I was doing my PhD, you know what I mean, when I was doing my master's in particular, so I would kind of like, know how the world is like out there. Because obviously when you do postgraduate, studies, either master's or PhD, it's quite a very lonely journey, you know what I mean?
Yes,
So it gets very
yes,
lonely, it gets very cold, and it gets overwhelming as well, a lot of anxieties, and a lot of people don't make it out, you know what I mean? We have a lot of people actually pulling off from the masters and the PhD program because it just get too much, So I really wanna, admire you a lot for just, putting this platform, all together. And it is a necessary intervention, that will help a whole lot of students, prospective students, and even supervisors as well, so that they'll know exactly to what we have kind of like went through as when we were students, and how could that be avoided moving forward. But thanking you so much, Prof, for your time and for putting this together and for making my voice heard. For the longest time I thought, oh well, no one's gonna hear my voice apart from my students.
I know. No, no, such an important voice. It was a really an important conversation to have, and I'm grateful. So yeah, you'll see when the episodes come out, and I hope you end up being happy with what we have put on record here. I'm certainly so happy with, because the insights, like I said, and the information that you shared is so helpful, and it's really gonna cut across even beyond just the South African context. Someone elsewhere will also be able to relate to your journey and some of the approaches you took theoretically, methodologically as well, and so forth. So, yep, thank you very much. But we shall end it here for now and then have future conversations as well around other topics, like I said. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. Looking forward to the final material. You keep well and take care. Thank you so much.
Same to you. Thank you. Goodbye.